The following clip is from a book review and analysis video I made on Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. The book explores the idea that our society has been transformed into a Huxleyan, not Orwellian, dystopia as a result of the television displacing the written word as our primary means of understanding ourselves. George Orwell wrote the famous novel 1984, which showcases a futuristic totalitarian surveillance state where people are controlled through force and fear. Big Brother, the state, watches and oppresses the people at all times. In the novel Brave New World, on the other hand, Aldous Huxley imagined that no such North Korean-style government would be necessary to oppress the future. Instead of people being controlled by force and fear, Huxley believed that people would be controlled by pleasure and entertainment. Truth and history would not be suppressed. They would simply be made irrelevant by titillating distractions. People would fall in love with technologies that would undo their capacity to think. Neil Postman argues that the television is the prime example of this technology. The following clip is an example of why Postman believes this is the case. The next section of this video is titled, "God Isn't Dead. Look! There he is on the TV!" Many of the passages that we're going to go over in this section come from the chapter Shuffle Off to Bethlehem, where Postman talks about televangelism and how entertainment culture and just TV had begun during his time to change religion, and more specifically Christianity, into something almost unrecognizable, shallow, and just kind of weird. And I have to say, what he writes here definitely hits home, because I mean, when you look at a lot of churches, almost all, churches with any sizable congregation have some sort of video option. And I don't disparage having a video option, but I mean, look, I used to go to Life Church, and they certainly have done a lot of great things, no doubt. But when I was reading this chapter and what Postman has to write here about religion becoming entertainment, I had to think of Life Church, because Life Church, when you go there, or if you watch online or whatever, it's a production. First passage I'd like to read and discuss comes on page 121. The executive director of the National Religious Broadcasters Association sums up what he calls the unwritten law of all television preachers. You can get your share of the audience only by offering people something they want. You will note, I am sure, that this is an unusual religious credo. There is no great religious leader, from the Buddha to Moses to Jesus to Muhammad to Luther, who offered people what they want, only what they need. But television is not well suited to offering people what they need. It is user-friendly. It is too easy to turn off. It is at its most alluring when it speaks the language of dynamic visual imagery. It does not accommodate complex language or stringent demands. As a consequence, what is preached on television is not anything like the Sermon on the Mount. Religious programs are filled with good cheer. They celebrate affluence. Their featured players become celebrities. Though their messages are trivial, the shows have high ratings, or rather, because their messages are trivial, the shows have high ratings. I believe I am not mistaken in saying that Christianity is a demanding and serious religion. When it is delivered as easy and amusing, it is another kind of religion altogether. So again, Postman's driving, this point home that, some things that are of real substance are just not suited for television. And religion, there's a lot of aspects to religion that, they're just not suited for, a television program. And so what he's basically arguing is that whenever people try to televise religion, they have to cut out all the boring and nitty-gritty details to make it entertaining, which means that the religion's kind of being debased and stripped of its real fiber. The Sermon on the Mount is not something that you typically see on television, because it's not quite as appealing as somebody yelling about the devil and vaccines. Continuing on, there are of course counter-arguments to the claim that television degrades religion. Among them is that spectacle is hardly a stranger to religion. If one puts aside the Quakers and a few other austere sects, every religion tries to make itself appealing through art, music, icons, and awe-inspiring ritual. The aesthetic dimension to religion is the source of its attraction to many people. This is especially true of Roman Catholicism and Judaism, which supply their congregants with haunting chants, magnificent robes and shawls, magical hats, wafers and wine, stained glass windows, and the mysterious cadences of ancient languages. The difference between these accoutrements of religion and the floral displays, fountains, and elaborate sets we see on television is that the former are not, in fact, accoutrements, but integral parts of the history and doctrines of the religion itself. They require congregants to respond to them with suitable reverence. A Jew does not cover his head at prayer because a skull cap looks good on television. A Catholic does not light a votive candle to improve the look of the altar. Rabbis, priests, and Presbyterian ministers do not, in the midst of a service, take testimony from movie stars to find out why they are religious people. The spectacle we find in true religions has as its purpose enchantment, not entertainment. The distinction is critical. By endowing things with magic, enchantment is the means through which we may gain access to sacredness. Entertainment is the means through which we distance ourselves from it. Again, I have to think of like Life Church with the light shows and stuff. I like the fact that Life Church has, put the Bible online free for everybody, the Bible app. They've done a lot of charity work. And I've listened to some of their sermons or seen some of their sermons in person, and they're real good. But I got to say, when I'm there and I see the light show and the elaborate musical sets and the cool hip haircuts and fashion and all that stuff, I go, this is just, this doesn't feel like church. This feels like a church trying to be like a rock concert, not because there's any symbolism or meaning in the rock concert setup, but just because the church knows that if they act like a rock concert, they'll probably get more people to show up and be entertained by that rock concert. Continuing, the reply to this is that most of the religion available to us on television is fundamentalist, which explicitly disdains ritual and theology in favor of direct communication with the Bible itself, that is, with God. Without ensnaring myself in a theological argument, for which I am unprepared, I think it both fair and obvious to say that on television, God is a vague and subordinate character. Though his name is invoked repeatedly, the concreteness and persistence of the image of the preacher carries the clear message that it is he, not he, who must be worshipped. I do not mean to imply that the preacher wishes it to be so, only that the power of a close-up, televised face in color makes idolatry a continual hazard. Television is, after all, a form of graven imagery far more alluring than a golden calf. I suspect, though I have no external evidence of it, that Catholic objections to Bishop Fulton Sheen's theatrical performances on television of several years back sprang from the impression that viewers were misdirecting their devotions away from God and toward Bishop Sheen, whose piercing eyes, awesome cape, and stately tones were as close a resemblance to a deity as charisma allows. It's very easy for people to mistake the preacher in their mind's eye, whether consciously or not, for being the real person to be worshipped rather than God. When you look at actors and celebrities, they're basically worshipped because, they just look good on screen. And Postman's saying, look, that same rule can apply for religious figures as well, which would be probably the opposite of what they want, but nevertheless, TV lends itself to that kind of problem arising. Now I'd like to move on to page 124, where Postman writes, as a member of the Commission on Theology, Education, and the Electronic Media of the National Council of the Churches of Christ, I am aware of the deep concern among established Protestant religions about the tendency toward refashioning Protestant services so that they are more televisable. It is well understood at the National Council that the danger is not that religion has become the content of television shows, but that television shows may become the content of religion. Life Church literally has, or at least they have had in the past, an At the Movies series where they look at movie scenes, maybe even TV scenes, and preach sermons on them. Now obviously they're tying those scenes back to the Bible, and they're looking for the themes that are congruent with what's in the Bible. And honestly, like whenever I've seen those sermons, I get something out of them. I think that there's certainly some merit to them, but it's one of those things where you're like, yeah, this is a little odd that we're analyzing a movie in a church. Now, the last passage I would like to read and discuss comes on page 155. And the reason I like to discuss it is because it has to deal with culture. It doesn't explicitly reference religion, but it does talk about culture. And it just must be said from the outset that religion, more than any other force in human history, has created culture. Particularly in America, Christianity underpins our culture, all the way through. And I think part of the reason we've experienced so much instability of late is because fewer and fewer people are consulting church, Christianity, religion, and so we're becoming detached from the things that underpin our culture, and that's just kind of leading to mass kind of confusion. Religion, it informs pretty much all the stories that are in a given culture. Like in America, most popular story ever told besides the Bible is Harry Potter, and that is basically the Bible right there. I mean, it features a boy who has to die, be resurrected, and then vanquish the Dark Lord after that's been done. I mean, it's right there. It's just a Christ narrative through and through. I just want you to keep that in mind as we read this passage because it's relevant. What Huxley teaches is that in the age of advanced technology, spiritual devastation is more likely to come from an enemy with a smiling face than from one whose countenance exudes suspicion and hate. And the Huxleyan prophecy, Big Brother does not watch us by his choice. We watch him by ours. There is no need for wardens or gates or ministries of truth. When a population becomes distracted by trivia, when cultural life is redefined as a perpetual round of entertainments, when serious public conversation becomes a form of baby talk, when, in short, a people become an audience and their public business a vaudeville act, then a nation finds itself at risk. Culture death is a clear possibility. And I would also add, and I think this is congruent with what Postman would say, that when religion becomes trivial, when religion becomes shallow, when religion becomes a vaudeville act, a form of entertainment, then yes, culture death is a clear possibility. And I think that's the possibility that we're facing in particularly America right now. If a society has forgotten what it believed in the past, then how in the world is it supposed to figure out what it's supposed to believe in the future? You know what I'm saying?